if you are not mixing some video, whether it's a live video call, whether it's an in-person meeting, whether it's a video message, if you're not mixing some of this in, especially kind of like in that early mid stage where this thing could either rapidly accelerate or fall apart and jump off the tracks, a deal I'm talking about, then you're missing out on a huge opportunity to let people know that you actually see them, hear them, understand them, appreciate them, have something of value to offer them. Because if you're trying to do that through text alone, or, a beautifully designed PDF or report or landing page that breaks down all this stuff, I mean, that stuff all matters, but I need to know. And of course, we're exclusively talking about a more complex sale here where a human being is generally desired and necessary, or else we would be having this conversation. That a video message closes some of the gaps that you might be leaving open right now, and it could be to your detriment. And I don't mean to play on fear here. I'm just saying humans make decisions based on intent, especially early on in the relationship.
Team, that was Ethan Beute, and he's the chief evangelist for BombBomb, and he's also the author of a couple of great books. Back in 2009, he and his co-author, Stephen Passanelli, the VP of marketing for BombBomb, they released their first book, Rehumanize Your Business: How Personal Videos Accelerate Sales and Improve Customer Experience. Today, we're talking about their most recent book, Human-Centered Communications: A Business Case Against Digital Pollution. And gang, there's nobody on this podcast or listening to it who would debate there's a lot of digital pollution out there today. And Stephen and Ethan define that as unwelcome digital distractions. We'll talk about the 3 different types of digital pollution. We'll also talk about how it doesn't matter what technology you leverage today. If you can't sell, then it's not going to matter. At the end of the day, as professional salespeople, we need to add value in every interaction with a client or prospect. And we have to sell, and sell is defined as helping a buyer make a better business decision, helping a buyer achieve that desired business outcome. Ethan references some great research by Dr. Nick Morgan, which tells us that most of our buyers are really first trying to assess our intent as professional salespeople. We're trying to help us, we're trying to help them. There's a concept shared that I really like: warmth before competence. We used to always say in sales management, your team has to know that you care before they care what you know. So we'll get into that conversation. All of this and much more today with Ethan Beute. And folks, if you enjoyed today's conversation, which I'm sure you will, please like and subscribe to the Selling Well podcast. And thank you very much for doing so. Here's Ethan Beute. Ethan, welcome to the show. And thank you so much for making a little bit of time for us today.
Sure. Thank you so much for the invite, Mark.
So I'm a big fan, Ethan. As listeners to the podcast know, I'm a little old school in terms of reading my books. So
Me too.
I love to grab a book in the morning very early with a couple of cups of coffee. I love making my highlights. And back in the day, a couple of years back, in 2019, I loved Rehumanize Your Business: How Personal Videos Accelerate Sales and Improve the Customer Experience. And boy, was that ever timely. So I think you're the gods were with you on that one for sure. But you can just look at my book here. Those of you watching us on YouTube, what I really loved about it, Ethan, to be honest with you, was it was such a fantastic how-to. So what are we going to do? Why would we do it? And then it really got into the how do we do it, and love the research. I always love sales books or marketing books that have detail and research, but still communicate really effectively. Spectacular book. But what I love to talk about here today is we're going to talk about your latest book with Stephen Passanelli, of course, your co-author, Human-Centered Communication: A Business Case Against Digital Pollution. What a relevant topic these days. But before we jump into all that great stuff, tell us a little bit about your professional journey. Tell me a little bit about how you got to this point.
Sure. Thank you so much for reading. I read with a pencil, not a highlighter, but it's the exact same effect. And so I've been at BombBomb, a software company. We're based here in Colorado Springs. We make it easy to record and send video messages in place of what would otherwise be faceless typed out text for a number of benefits that I'm sure we'll be talking about through our time together. And prior to joining, I had worked a dozen years in local television. So I had run marketing inside your local ABC or NBC or Fox station. I don't know what the equivalent is in Canada, but
Global City TV. It's
yeah.
okay. We're our podcast, North America. I'll tell you the best Canadian television, US television. We
Oh,
all grew
funny.
up watching US television. I am sorry to Global and City and all you folks who do great work.
Yeah. So I ran marketing in Grand Rapids, Michigan, in Chicago, and out here in Colorado Springs, where I am now, and just got bored of it for a variety of reasons, and I won't beat it up. But I started doing project work. I was working on an MBA, and so in some of that project work, I connected with the two co-founders of BombBomb very early on. I just really liked them both personally. I liked what they were working on. We were reading and thinking about a lot of the same things at the time. There's just like a lot of kinship there. And so at a certain point, they made me a somewhat competitive offer, sufficient that my wife and I weren't scared out of our minds at the comp we were leaving on the table to join a company that had very few customers. You know, the health insurance was frankly not very good. But I made the jump anyway. And it's just been an amazing journey to really pioneer this movement of blending video messages in along with all of our other connection and communication points. And it's been such a joy. I started writing Rehumanize before anyone else knew that I was working on it, besides my wife and son, who would observe that I was doing this, you know, at the crack of dawn or the better part of a Saturday or a Sunday. And I started it after I hit my 6-year anniversary at BombBomb. And I was just kind of welled up with what I would like to refer to as healthy pride about how far we had come as a company and as a community of like, this is actually a thing. I mean, I'm of the mind that basically anyone working in a professional capacity can and should have video messages in the mix, because it's got one foot in this real world of in-person live Zoom call or Microsoft Teams or Google Meet or whatever, live phone call, but it's also got one foot in this other world of the asynchronicity and convenience of emails, Slack, text messaging, LinkedIn messages, et cetera. So it's got the richness in human qualities and the nuances and the subtleties of the former, but it's got the convenience of the latter. So it performs this unique role in the communication mix. And so last thing I'll share, just to build the bridge into human-centered communication, a couple years after that released, it's gone really, really well. It's been taken up very nicely. And thank you again for reading it and highlighting it. You know, we were observing, because there's been a lot more competition in this space. There's been a lot of VC, hundreds of millions of dollars of venture capital have come into our space. We're bootstrapped, by the way. So that is all.
Wow.
You know,
Still.
Yeah. So that's all sitting in the accounts of our competitors. But, you know, it's attracted all this space. But what we were observing is that a lot of people treat video like it's magic, right? Like, I'm going to take the same garbage messages with the same garbage lists and the same garbage processes, turn it into video, and somehow it's going to magically transform everything. And then they're disappointed. They're training people who've never seen a video message that video messages are just a new version of the same irrelevant, selfish stuff. And so that was kind of what we undertook with human-centered communication, is if we're going to be doing so much more of this selling and serving digitally, virtually, and online, how do we do it in a way, not just restricted to video messages, but all of our communication? How do we do it in a way that's truly going to connect in light of all of the dynamics in today's market? So we roped a bunch of our expert friends into the conversation and put it together.
10 or 11 of them, if my memory serves.
Correct.
10 or
Yeah,
11
it is 11.
Great...
It started as 10. And then Steve was like, well, we can't write about the winning by design bow tie funnel without inviting Jocko into the conversation.
There you go.
Like, oh, of course, it's way better for that.
So boy, you touched on so many points that we're going to unpack, Ethan, and thank you for that. But when you get to, hey, video is not a catch-all end-all where you can still have the same garbage messaging, nor is any of the other 5,000 sales technologies that allow us to identify intent or trigger some activity or. At the end of the day, somebody has to be able to hold an engaging, authentic, curious conversation with the prospect where you got a point of view as to how you get them to a better future, one way or the other, and you have some expertise and experience all surrounded in value. Can you add value? This idea of pitching or being a talking brochure I'm sure I'm preaching to the converted, but it really is still shockingly prevalent. And so, as we have kind of what would be deemed a small business within the funnel, but because I'm listed as I don't get to make any decisions in it, by the way, but because I'm listed as the president, I just get blasted with everything. It would be so easy to market to me personally. All you have to do is watch one video on our website about value proposition messaging and say, Mark, I watched the video. Let's figure out if it worked. And so I'd feel compelled to respond, but no one ever does it. It's all about them and their product and their technology. Such to the point, Ethan, you'll maybe giggle about this, but we get pinged probably once every 2 weeks from a sales training company saying, hey, would we like to train our sales team? We are a sales training company. So this leads to this digital pollution. So the digital pollution. Tell me a little bit about, well, actually, let's go to the basics. How would you describe digital pollution? What is digital pollution?
Sure. Bonus points for separating experience and expertise, by the way. Those two things are very, very different. They're both important, but they're not the same thing. So digital pollution, Steve gave it, Steve, by the way, is my longtime friend, team member, our CMO here at BombBomb. I've known him for over a decade now. And it's just, we work together so well. So it's been fun to write both books with him. And he came up with this 3-word phrase for digital pollution to define it as simply as possible. Unwelcome digital distractions. Unwelcome. I didn't ask for it. I don't want it. I'm not sure why I got it. It's not timely, relevant, or anticipated. It's unwelcome. It's digital, right? That's what we're talking about here when we're trying to connect and communicate digitally, virtually, and online. And then distraction. It takes me away from what I really want. And now I have to spend some time, and I'll break it down with a simple 3-tier taxonomy. Now I have to figure out, what is this? Who is it from? Is it real? Is it from who it says it's from? Is this link safe to click? Is this attachment going to install malware, or is it real? Like, right. Do they actually know anything about me or not? Like, this is all these things that immediately, as soon as we give it a little bit of attention, it's this distraction from what we really need and want to do, because the people aren't doing the work to make it easy for us to understand, easy for us to say yes. That's the whole goal of taking on a human-centered communication approach, is to meet people a little bit more than halfway, right? Put their needs, wants, and interests on equal footing or on a level playing field so that it's easier for them to give us what we want, which is some version of a yes, right? Like, just so anyway, the 3 forms of digital pollution, and we all recognize this, right? You made a reference to it. People in your business trying to pitch you, like you're already an expert in your business. They're trying to sell you the service you provide other people. Like this, that's pollution.
Hilarious.
It's a waste of space. It creates the noise and drowns out the signal. And so there's innocent digital pollution. And this is just kind of like there's no ill intent. I don't mean to mistreat you, or I'm not causing any particular trouble on purpose, but it's this reply all when you don't need to reply all. It's so you pick up your phone and there are like 84 new messages and you're like, why am I in this group text message? Right? Like, why didn't they just ask me directly? So that type of thing. And it goes back to like the old fashioned email chain letters, right? Like, forward this to 3 people if you want good luck, that kind of thing, right? Like, so it's innocent, right? It's silly, it's annoying, it's frustrating, but it's like, gosh, I wish my aunt hadn't included me on that reply all email thread, right? So, and then on the far other end, and I already kind of alluded to this, is intentional digital pollution. We all know that cybersecurity is a multi-billion-dollar industry and growing. It's because there are actual, legitimate, intentional threats in this space.
Yeah.
And then the big fat, and so I don't need to describe that any further. I think we all know what that is. The big fat middle is what we call consequential pollution. And this is like, I don't necessarily intend, like I'm not an intentional polluter. I'm not actually running a phishing scheme. I'm not looking for personal data and harvesting it to sell on the internet or to use myself. But it's also not innocent. Like, I'm doing things and I know that I'm making trade-offs. And what we need to keep in mind now in this environment is the more trade-offs we're willing to make that are a little bit more selfish than giving, is that we're training people that we're not worth their time and attention. We're training people that we're not valuing their return on their time and attention. So if we value their return on time and attention, language I picked up from Andy Paul, by the way. ROTA is what he calls it. And I was like, tell me more about ROTA, return on time and attention. This is kind of like the fundamental flip that will be prevalent throughout if you choose to read the book or throughout this conversation. Is like, we think so much about our ROI, like what's our ROI? And then we behave in ways that are then selfishly motivated. Whereas if we value people's return on time and attention with any message or experience we're creating and delivering, then we're so much more likely to get our return on investment, right? And so this consequential pollution is where the conversation is. And then last thing here, even if you're very sincere, you're very intentional, you're personalized and relevant, your model supports a situation, your business model supports a situation where you can profitably do truly bespoke messaging. I know that's not everybody. It's not even BombBomb. So we do have to make some of these trade-offs, and we are polluters. Everyone's a polluter. The goal is just to minimize it as much as possible. So even if you are perfectly clean, clear, intentional, sincere, you're putting in the time and effort to be truly personal, not just personalized and truly relevant. I am watching the video on your website. I am talking about something that you posted on LinkedIn in a meaningful and relevant way, not just like dropping it and then going into my garbage pitch.
Exactly.
Right. You have to know that you're still arriving in someone's inbox or in someone's message box or in someone's social feed or social thread that's noisy and polluted. And so you're not going to get the benefit of the doubt that you did 3 years ago, or certainly not 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Trust is so much harder to build and harder to maintain in this environment. Attention is harder to get and harder to maintain in this environment. And so even if you're doing everything right, we still need to be aware of this conversation around digital pollution.
Well, I may get the stats wrong, Ethan, but I think I picked up in Rehumanize Your Business, your first book, or your last 2 books ago, wasn't it 300 billion emails go back and forth every day, something of that nature? 300,
something like that. Yeah, I don't even remember that stat, but yes, it's
yeah.
like,
sorry about that. I got my highlighted version. I got my cheat sheets for those listening. It's not like I remember that, but we actually use that stat quite a bit, and I think it's an interesting epiphany for folks to go today in today's world. I often tell folks I don't get any good news in email typically. So maybe I get between 200 and 300 emails a day. That's not unusual, by the way. But for the teams we coach or win or work with, I'll never get someone telling me by email we want a major deal. They're going to call me for that, or they're going to wait to pop into my office and tell me that if I'm on their site as a CRO. So I tend to get work. And I'm not that keen to jump into email, frankly, as a result of which. And, so I'll do it maybe 3 times a day, so I just don't get buried. But something unique and different standing out is still today so rare. That's why I've always just felt video is so incredibly powerful. So amongst all that text on black text on white, again, I don't get any interesting or good news there. If you actually had an image that was a little bit interesting and relevant to me, or if you've got your animated video, thank you, BombBomb, where I'm saying, hey, Mark, and it says on top of it, I've got a 45-second video. My impetus to actually click on that is crazy high. So I'm going to do that. And it's interesting. I'm interested in your perspective, Ethan. Maybe it's just us, but I still don't get many of those in a given day today now. Our clients send lots of those, but we don't get many. What's happening out there? Is it gaining traction, or why isn't my inbox getting more of these? If all these SaaS companies, big names you would know, they are marketing to me.
Yeah. So despite our best efforts and those of our competitors, it's still not a normalized behavior. And I think there are a number of reasons why. I would put it into kind of 3 quick categories, I guess. The first is the biggest one of all, and I just call that basket or bucket human vulnerability, right? Fear of judgment, fear of rejection. Am I doing this right? I don't like the way I look. I don't like the way I sound. all this kind of fear of judgment and rejection. And it's very deep. It's very human. It's very natural. So even someone who sees this opportunity and says, gosh, this would be so helpful. I can think of 5 great use cases. And by the way, I could talk through about 60 or 70 of them right now across the customer life cycle and across the employee life cycle. They're like, anytime you're sending an email is an opportunity, or any other digital message is an opportunity to perhaps mix in or even replace text with a video. So that's the biggest one, human vulnerability. It's like, I like the idea of it. I tried to do it. I'm not comfortable. And so I'm going to quit before I ever truly start in earnest. I'm going to fall back to my previous habits because, hey, I got this far, using traditional means. And so why can't I keep going with traditional means? Right. And that as a sales coach and a sales trainer, like, that you're teaching people how to achieve their outcomes better, faster, more often, more consistently, more predictably, et cetera. They know what they should be doing, but they don't do it for any of a variety of reasons. The reason people don't do this is it's newish and they don't feel like they're maybe doing it right, or they don't like the way they look or they sound, which again, is just based in human evolutionary psychology. Another category would be the value prop or the cost benefit of a sales leader or a sales manager and the process of change and transformation. Is this worth, like, okay, I see it, I get it, I understand it. My buddy over at this other company, his team is doing it and I've heard good things, but is that what I want to take on right now? Am I going to ask my team to all get comfortable doing something new and different? I think the average, tech take up, like when a new tool is adopted, is something like 30%. And so, do I want to bother right now? And is it a high enough priority? Right. So that's another one. And because it's not super well understood, the norms aren't established, there isn't a ton of true hard science or even academic research around it. I think most of the research, and I'd even put ours in that category, is, I wouldn't say selfishly motivated, like it's legit, but we have a handful of case studies, we have some survey data, et cetera. And so do most of our competitors, but it's not like, you're reading, in every issue of Harvard Business Review, another great case study of, video messaging. So that's another one. That's a category. I would just say, like, the sales leaders or customer success leaders challenge or problem. Like, do I want to undertake this now and undertake this change, given all the other things that are challenging in my world right now? The last one is, I would call the video prospecting problem. I think it is a true detriment to the movement. And I do see this as a movement. It's got at most 250,000 or so, between 250,000 and 500,000 consistent practitioners.
Okay.
I can give some definitions. It's all speculative on my part, but I can validate that, if it's interesting. But I think the problem is this movement is being kind of cut down a little bit because people are buying, and therefore competitors are selling video messaging around specifically this use case of prospecting. And that's probably, I would argue that it's not the best use case, right? Your best use cases are with people who have a reasonable expectation of hearing from you so that you can explain things more clearly, convey emotion, whether that's this positive side of thank you, good job, congratulations, or this I'm sorry, I dropped the ball, I've got bad news to share with you, and I don't want to do that, in an impersonal, cold way.
Smart.
So many use cases, but prospecting isn't the best use case. And so what we wind up doing again is taking the same tired, selfish, kind of lazy emails, turning them into videos, thinking it's going to be magic. And so not only then are those companies saying, well, yeah, we got a little bit of a lift, but it's not dramatic, right? So they're feeling like this doesn't work. And because they didn't try it with their account management team, or they didn't try it in terms of following up after a really good discovery meeting, recapping highlights in a video, and doing a little show and tell with a screen recording, perhaps. We can talk about the benefits of that use case, right? These really good, warm use cases where your likelihood of being played and therefore experienced as a human being and experienced as a trusted expert is really valuable. So prospecting isn't the highest and best use case, in my opinion, but that's what people are buying it for. Therefore, that's what companies are selling it for. And so, and then on the other side is we're training people who've never seen video messages that it's not a very useful thing. And so I call it the video prospecting problem. is that it creates false impressions for both the recipient and the sender that this is an amazing transformation of how we work. And so the bias toward prospecting, I would call the third problem. It's probably the smallest of the three, but it is real.
By the way, thanks so much, Ethan. You don't always get, evangelists for technology providers coming back and saying, hey, admittedly, the data is not spectacularly rock solid, saying you have to do this right now. And it's that kind of authenticity and openness where, somebody listening to this podcast go, okay, here's an organization that actually wants to help us do better, because they're going to tell us the truth. And you said, you can't just have the garbage message, the garbage value prop that I learned after getting 3 days of onboarding with my new technology provider, and I practiced 4 times. I don't just convert that to, a video and send it out. Or I'm not just going to, trigger some hack where they say, hey, it's cool because it was a video and Mark did something wacky to get my attention. Maybe that works in some businesses or some industries, but it's certainly never been my way. I'm not going to be I'm not the wacky guy.
I feel like a lot of that wacky stuff we see is total echo chamber. Right? It's for this immediate community to say, I did something totally radically different. It's like, did it produce totally radical results?
Absolutely. By the way, LinkedIn platitudes, same thing. Yes. We see them everywhere.
Yes.
But one of the things we always try and where we evangelize the use of video is we're delighted, with the types of people who are selling in the organizations that we work with. We had that privilege of, not massive scale. So we only work with companies we really want to work with, and we make sure there's people on the team we want to work with. And so to me, I'm always, my messaging is nobody expects us to be a genius in our industry or have Harvard level business acumen where I just came out of McKinsey and now I'm selling for a living. But we want to be sincere, authentic, and make sure we have a point of view as to why we're not wasting somebody's time. And everybody in the teams that we work with, they can do that, or they will be able to do that after a certain period of time. So why wouldn't I just add to that, leveraging video to humanize that reach out even more? And I think to a certain extent, Ethan, there is, there's the Albert Mehrabian research, which I'm sure you guys have gone through, that says there's so many things we pick up looking at a picture or an actual video, and it's the nonverbal communication that matters so much. And just, one of the things looking at the screen here, for those, this is a podcast gang, but I've got Ethan and I are watching each other on video. Why? Because there's so many more verbal cues. So I think we can do a better podcast if I can see Ethan while we're having this conversation, and I can. And then I feel good because he's got this body language that says he's kind of enjoying the process. So I just think it's such an easy and critical opportunity for everybody out there to try and get through that first one, which is the aversion to seeing ourselves on camera, or 40 years ago, it was the aversion to hearing our voice on a tape recorder. I'm that old.
Yeah, me too.
I remember a tape recorder, and the first time you heard your voice on a tape recorder, you went, "What?
Who is this?
Who is this? That's not how it sounds."
Recording myself. Yeah,
that's right. That's not how it sounds. I can't sound like that. When we do, by the way, we do a lot of video training with sales folks. And the first 3 times, it's really not about what they're doing. They're just getting them used to the camera, because when we play it back, they're frozen, but suddenly they stop being concerned about the camera. We get in, they actually can put themselves into actual real role play. It's just a magnificent tool. So people get over the video. If you can work, it doesn't take 100 times to get comfortable doing it. It takes like 7 and you'll be fine.
Yeah, it's different for different people. And I think, thank you for that positive feedback on, the data element. I mean, certainly rich anecdotes, tons of stories and examples. And, I've heard things like, of course, people feel like they know me before they meet me, and that's a huge benefit to me. I also hear things like, this didn't just change my business, it changed my life, like super dramatic, transformative stuff. Wow. Right. But it's all based in this. And so I'll speak to the intuitive leader that says, okay, this is interesting. And that nonverbal, I know that matters. Like, I know that when I interview and hire my sales reps, I'm hiring them for skills that don't come through in typed out emails, right? Like all that stuff. And so the most important idea here, and I'm borrowing a bit from Dr. Nick Morgan, who's awesome. He's written a number of books. He's a communication expert. The thing that every human being cares about above anything else when we're trying to connect and communicate with them is our intent. He uses that word intent. Prior to intent, I would have used words or phrases like your motivation, your alignment. Do you seem to believe what you're saying? Do you seem to understand me? Do you seem to have my best interest in mind? Colloquially, we say people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And this gets to the two bases of every single social judgment every human being makes, typically subconsciously, all day long, every day, all week, all month, all year, every year, which is warmth before competence. They do want to know your competence, how much you know, but they don't care about your competence until they know how much you care, your warmth, right? And this is where your intent comes in. And so before I care about how amazing, how smart, how helpful, all of this, I need to know, do you have my best interest in mind? Again, this is ancient, deep human evolutionary psychology. Let's just go back 1,000 years, let's say, or 10,000 years. If I made a decision to proceed, if I said yes to you, no matter the context, based exclusively on your competence, I could very easily be taken advantage of. And certainly back then, the consequences could be fatal. The consequences today probably aren't fatal. I might lose my job because I make a very bad decision because I didn't judge. Do you seem to care about me? Do you seem to even believe what you're saying? Do you seem aligned in your motivation? Are you actually trying to help me? And so this intent piece is something that the human brain desires so much that in its absence, we make it up. Our brain just fills in the gaps. Again, borrowing from Dr. Nick Morgan on this. And so if we don't give people that, they're filling in the gaps. And the problem is they're doing it defensively in a protective way, naturally, to protect themselves.
Right.
And so they're assuming the worst, right? If I can't tell that you have my best interest in mind, I'm going to assume that you don't, because it's the safest thing for me to do. Now, just walk back to text versus video in some of this communication. Text cannot deliver your intent. You can say, I'm honestly, or, I really mean, or, I can use all these words and phrases, superlatives and emojis and punctuation, but it doesn't come through. Humans read this naturally from other human beings. And so if you are not mixing some video, whether it's a live video call, whether it's an in-person meeting, whether it's a video message, you're not mixing some of this in, especially kind of like in that early mid stage where this thing could either rapidly accelerate or fall apart and jump off the tracks, a deal I'm talking about. Then you're missing out on a huge opportunity to let people know that you actually see them, hear them, understand them, appreciate them, have something of value to offer them. Because if you're trying to do that through text alone, or, a beautifully designed PDF or report or landing page that breaks down all this stuff, I mean, that stuff all matters, but I need to know. And of course, we're exclusively talking about a more complex sale here where a human being is generally desired and necessary, or else we would be having this conversation. That a video message closes some of the gaps that you might be leaving open right now, and it could be to your detriment. And I don't mean to play on fear here. I'm just saying humans make decisions based on intent, especially early on in the relationship.
Wow, that's Thomas, wherever you are in the universe right now, that's the clip for the intro. So that's the $1 million nugget, gang, for today. Humans make decisions based on intent. I really love this warmth before competence. So we've always used that coaching, coaching sales leaders, Ethan, where we say, hey, they gotta, know you care before they care, about what you know. But that warmth before competence, that's a great one to take away. And that what you're trying to communicate, the most important thing, and we're going to go find Dr. Nick Morgan, the book. And by the way, maybe put them on the content intent. What's their intent? So I want to unpack both those. Quick example, team, by the way, the warmth before competence. Ethan and I were having a quick social chat before we started the podcast here today, and he was kind enough to say, listen to podcast with some other people. And our podcast, and he brought up a gentleman by the name of Frank Cespedes, who's a real thought leader on professional sales, a professor at Harvard. So clearly one of the global thought leaders on professional sales. He's written 7 books on professional sales, latest Sales Management That Works. They're all fantastic. They're all fantastic. He teaches at Harvard. And the first thing out of my mouth when Ethan said, hey, I listened to that podcast was, I said, Frank's a great guy. Because he's so warm and he's so humble and he's so unassuming. That warmth before his competence is off the scale, off the charts in terms of what Ethan and I care about for, professionally. But the first thing out of my mouth was, he's a great guy. It's funny, I do that all the time. That's such a great takeaway, that warmth before competence. I'm going to write that down as a key one. But back to this intent. They care about your intent. And folks, I'd write these down. People want to know that they're seen, they're heard, and they're understood, and then appreciated. But that understood, I think, is missing in professional sales. I think in professional sales today, generally, not everybody, of course, but one key issue we've got is we're teaching everybody new to this profession about us. So what they understand is our product or service. They understand our company. They don't really understand the true impact of what we do on our client or prospect. They don't spend enough time studying business acumen and maybe specific industry acumen. And as a result of which, small deals or starting sales development team, you're not going to get somebody's time and attention. If they don't think you understand their scenario, their world, they're not interested in talking to us. And on more material deals, what will happen is if we don't truly understand, we don't actually understand the value we're providing the client. So we're going to get negotiated on price, particularly in the future, folks, with 8 to 10% inflation coming our way. Get ready for that conversation. But if we can understand the real impact of what we do because we understand their business, that's how decisions become more compelling, because they actually trust that we know we can get them to a better future. Ethan,
two interesting things on that. Like, first, I think a lot of, especially younger sales reps, whether they're kind of in a BDR, SDR role, or whether they're like a young account executive, they'll take an idea like this and say like, well, gosh, I don't really know what it's like to be a chief technology officer, even though that's, who we're selling to most.
Right.
But the interesting thing that you overlook, and I'm sure you've talked about this a number of times, is, you're talking with 3 to 5 of them a week, or maybe even 10. And so you have this unique perspective. You don't have to understand everything about them either. Now I'll transition to something actionable that I picked up from, I'm sure, again, this is probably more common than I'm attributing it, but, I heard it from Morgan J. Ingram, who's featured in Human-Centered Communication. He's one of those 11 folks. Also Jen Allen, who's the chief evangelist at Challenger Inc. This idea of course, doing research before you get on the call, before you get on the video call, before you send that video message, whatever, you're doing your research, but you can't understand everything.
Mm-hmm.
You just have to make that effort. And then something that they recommend when you're in the live exchanges, you lay out, hey, I looked at this, and this. Here's what I understand about your situation. Here's what I've heard from other people like you. What am I missing here? Am I missing anything? Is this, and you ask for the validation. So it's this ability to kind of create some context, jump past all the kind of what I call how's the weather conversation that nobody wants to have.
Right.
Well, we all know,
right.
Right. We can look out the window because we're in the same town, let's say, in this kind of metaphor. And but you lay it out like, so the goal isn't a perfect understanding and hours and hours and hours of research. It's enough to know that you're in the right zone. And then you just kind of lay it out in a case that relates to your product or service and the conversation you want to have. And you turn it over to them, pick up your pencil and get ready to write a bunch of notes, because they're going to tell you, they're going to validate the things you think you know. They're going to fill in some of the gaps. They're going to correct you and all of this other stuff. And so I just want to make that a little bit less intimidating, especially for some of the younger sales reps. Like I hear that kind of feedback is like, how can I do this? Like, I get this human-centered approach, but gosh, I just don't have the time, or I don't have the depth of knowledge, or I don't have the experience, and I certainly don't have the expertise to do that. And I just want to lower the bar for people and say, you can make people feel seen, heard, and understood without investing, 2 weeks in reading multiple books and dissertations and reading everything ever published about a company or a person or a role, and still be of incredible value to somebody.
What a great point. By the way, those examples from the book, I think, are spectacular. What am I missing? After, by the way, you earn the right to ask that question. When you showcase, I've done a little bit of work and I've done a little bit of research, and I'm not calling you blind. You're not a name on a list. And maybe I'd toss in a little bit of social proof that says, hey, by the way, we are working with other large banks that look exactly like yours.
Yeah.
So there's enough for someone to say, hey, maybe I'll invest a little bit of time. And I know you know this inside and out, Ethan, some of our gang listening to the podcast too. But to me, that's a little bit of the Robert Cialdini, the 6 items of persuasion. It's a bit of reciprocity. It's in our DNA, where if you've done a little work with me, I feel like I owe you a little bit of something, and so you want to continue on and maybe give them a little bit more of the conversation, whereas they just go, hey, what's keeping you up at night? It's going to be click, and let's just end this conversation.
Yeah.
So I really love that in setting. The other thing I love to just share with young people, and because we see that a lot, where the sales development reps come in and they feel so vulnerable when we're coaching a big group, saying, hey, I haven't been in the industry 10 years. I didn't study all of this in school, so on and so on and so forth. And they focus a lot on what they don't know. And the only difference I find between the 25-year-old version of me and the 55-year-old version of me is, now I know anybody in any room I've ever been in at all, most of the universe they don't know. They just get comfortable that there's a lot they don't know, but they've tried to do some preparation to get into the room so that they've got something to contribute, but it doesn't paralyze them, the fact of everything they don't know or everything they forgot it, those things don't worry leaders. You just take what you know and try and add value, and then get curious, earn that right for the conversation. I find young folks want to be perfect, and we try and say, hey, just earn that right to have a conversation. What a great point, by the way. Your team knows a lot about what's going on with your clients and your prospects today. So the more sharing we do, not just with the sales team, but with the whole business, delivery, customer service, technology, what's going on out there? Let's have these conversations. Let's have these brekkie and learns or lunch and learns. Hey, what a fantastic conversation, Ethan. Just enjoying this thoroughly. And I've got one thing's jumping out at me. And by the way, at some point in time, no joke, we may have to change the name of our company, because 15 years ago, there was a conversion funnel that people thought about. And maybe it was never really serial and linear. If you did huge deals, it was more like the buyer's journey, even back then. But there was this thing for the new technology and SaaS companies and stage and conversion and so forth. But it was heavy at the top, it was wide at the top, and it got thinner, and it got very, very thin at the bottom. When you think of it today with this, we're trying to get to this personalization and humanizing the reach out and digital pollution. Our funnel from 15 years ago still exists with most companies out there. They blast everybody leveraging the technologies, lots of different technologies. They'll take a 3% return on some of those things. The smart ones will leverage 6 Sense or Zoom Info and get some intent data or track some trigger events, but not all of them are smart. They're blasting everybody with everything. What would your count? So first of all, it doesn't really work. But some of the organizations love the fact, hey, I still got 3%. I got a few leads in out of this thing. What are we doing to the other 97?
Yeah, so good. Okay, first and foremost, we can all laugh now about the physics of the funnel as originally designed, like the basic awareness, interest, desire, actions. Like you pour people in the top of the, you slide down the side, right?
Magically.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm thinking about a guy named Dr. Flint McLaughlin who flips it, and it's an inverted funnel because it's a series of these micro yeses, and you actually have to help people climb up the funnel. Which, when you start thinking about that, like, I'm out in
It's good.
Colorado, so I'm picturing like rock climbers is like going up the underside of a cliff ledge. Like, that's hard work,
Great.
right? And that's really a lot more what it's like. And so now this is going to get outside the bounds of an individual sales rep on a team. But like, the reason that I like the winning by design bow tie funnel is that it puts that point of commitment, right? In the older one, it's awareness, interest, desire, action, or similar. And
Mhm.
action is the purchase or the transaction. So that makes the whole thing a bit more transactional. And if you are an account executive, that's probably okay at some level, right? Because your goal is to meet the mid funnel, bring them to the point of action, close that deal, hand it off, repeat, right? And so that's your job actually at some level. Now, of course, we also work with a lot of people that are in business where they're incentivized in some way to maintain that for 12 months or 24 months. And that's in part because, CAC is going up, and in so many businesses, that initial purchase isn't even profitable. So
Mhm.
if we're incentivizing everybody and organizing our work to specifically drive that first transaction without really having the end in mind, which is the whole second half of the bow tie funnel. So it's shaped like a bow tie. The dot in the middle is the commitment or the purchase or the transaction, then onboarding, impact, and growth, and then the positive growth loop, or somebody like HubSpot would call it the flywheel, right? This idea where your customers stay, it's a long-term relationship, renewing, expanding, upsell, cross-sell, your customers becoming the next best source of your easiest, fastest converted customers, et cetera. Like, that's where we all want to get. So if we can work in an organization, this is one of the reasons you're seeing the rise of customer experience, the rise of revenue operations, and ultimately the rise of the CRO, is this alignment across that full journey to the growth loop or the flywheel requires this perspective of start to finish instead of three separate silos that hand
Mm.
things off to one another and create this disjointed kind of self-motivated movement through the funnel. And so by aligning it under a leader and with a shared, tech stack and a shared data insights across a RevOps function, et cetera, and some commitment to understanding the customer experience, irons a lot of that stuff out, and it allows us to start with the end in mind. And so if we want truly profitable customers, we need to throw out this transactional mindset. And again, like you said, this probably happens a lot on your show, like preaching, but like, so that's the thing. And so when we approach it that way, we're setting everything up for success, like true long-term success. And that's what we've always been trying to do. And I think I guess I'll stick with this converted language. Like, once you've seen the light, it's hard not to start moving toward it. And baby steps are fine, especially if you're stuck in one of these more legacy functions that is kind of influenced by the Industrial Revolution and Henry Ford's assembly line and some of these other models. Even though we all know the buyer's journey is nonlinear, we still treat it that way from an internal organization and operational standpoint. And of course, that's yesterday's model. It doesn't apply. And certainly up market in an enterprise sale, to what you said maybe 3 minutes ago, it never really even applied there. And yet we still organize that way. And so this influence of previous legacy, previous business culture on what we're doing today, I think it's easy to lose sight of, because you look at the photos, they're black and white, and it feels like it was forever ago. Henry Ford's assembly line is only about 100 years in our past. And the onset of the Industrial Revolution is only 200 years. And so to your lifetime and mine, that seems like a long time ago. But in, human experience and human evolution, that is yesterday.
So I love by the way, we're going to have to speak again, Ethan, right? So, or else we're going to stay for 3 hours, which I know doesn't work with your calendar. But there's so many things that you unpacked in such a clear way that are so helpful. But, you talk about Henry Ford's assembly line. I was having, thankfully, I was having a beer in a public place with somebody. They were having a beer a week ago, and they mentioned they had just done a tour of the current Toyota factory in Cambridge, Ontario. Our company is based in Toronto, Canada. And they said their inventory for that factory is between 60 and 90 minutes. They have 60 to 90 minutes worth of inventory.
Wow.
So think of that. With today's supply chain issues, that's how they roll. So you think, man, that is not Henry Ford's assembly line. And the other point I'll bring up, which I think is an interesting one, is some of what's driving that traditional funnel, the beer funnels we all enjoyed in college and university too many times for me. It's actually getting driven by either boards or investors because they aren't current on the current what's taking place. And the way they want to track their metrics is that area from 10 or 15 years ago. So everybody starts reporting on the metrics they want to see. And when we get involved with organizations, we maybe have a little more currency to go, we're not doing that. That's not how it works anymore and wouldn't even be helpful. So, let's talk about those deals that are already qualified and they're already in the funnel and what are we going to do there? But the stuff up top is just a fairy tale. So, but not everybody wants to hear that question. So I have a lot of empathy right now for CROs or sales leaders or CEOs, because I just think they're getting dragged in this direction. And the knee-jerk reaction is, let's throw more bodies doing garbage emails and train them poorly. And by the way, we'll churn them. So we don't care if a new business professional doesn't make it in their first job out of college and university. You have any idea what that would do to somebody's self-esteem? So I'm a little worried.
And meanwhile, you're burning down your total addressable market.
Exactly.
You're teaching them that and I'm going back to this return on time. You're teaching them that you're not worth looking at anymore. And the machines that are now tracking all human behavior, because this noise and pollution is growing so much that we're going to increasingly rely on it. I guarantee you've said this, and then I promise I'll stop because I know we're at time.
No, but please keep going.
You and I have said to somebody or heard from somebody in the past week, oh, you haven't seen that yet? Oh, go check your spam folder, right? So,
yes.
So even things we need and want are getting caught, and humans are going to rely on this more and more than ever. Of course, we know this in our social feeds as well, Mark. You and I could be connected to the exact same people on LinkedIn, but we refresh the feed and it looks dramatically different. And we've all done this before too, accepted a LinkedIn connection request or had one accepted. If you don't like or comment on anything of theirs, you're going to see them once or twice. If you don't like or comment, they're going to disappear like they never existed. And so those two dynamics are coming to more and more of our digital experience. And so if you're doing this outreach that people are not responding to, the path isn't to move from this, well, it takes 7 touches and now it takes 15 touches. The logical conclusion is it takes 92 touches. And so we better just crank this thing up to 11 and let it keep firing. That's not where we need to go here, because we're going to rely more and more on machines to help us find the signal in the noise. And so if you're not behaving in ways now that teach human beings on the receiving end, as a consequence, the machines that are monitoring their exact behavior and helping them make decisions in the future, if we're not aware of that dynamic now and behaving relative to it, we're setting ourselves up for failure in the years to come. So when I have the opportunity to do a formal presentation on human-centered communication, one of the subtitles I often give is today's path to tomorrow's revenue. The things we're doing today is going to inhibit or enhance our ability to reach the people we want to be in conversation with tomorrow. And that groundwork is being laid now, whether or not you've yet added them to the sequence or that type of thing. Like if you are planning on doing it, that groundwork is being laid now. And if we're not aware of that, then we're putting ourselves and these young people that we're hiring and putting in seats, they're already at a disadvantaged position before they start and nobody knows it.
Man, which explains, by the way you explain that identifies exactly why we're here. Because you think of over the last couple of years, the money that went into SaaS, we got to explode. We're going for a 3-year run rate ARR versus the multiple. I might not be here 5 years from now. People making those decisions are cashed out and gone.
Yeah.
So maybe I'm not thinking like the old days where I want a 20-year business. Maybe I'm thinking we're going to burn this thing up for 3 or 4 years and then get out. But if you want to be in the long term and add value, that's such a great point. Everybody every week is bringing up, hey, and maybe it's in the spam folder, because those parameters keep changing. Add value and leverage intent trigger events. Find those folks who are interested in what you do because they're out there. And now technology helps us find them. Target them. You might have a higher propensity, and then add value. Hey, first of all, Ethan, I got to just say thank you, thank you, thank you. What an exciting conversation. If there's anybody out there who's not leveraging video today as part of your business process, do it. Every new client we get at some point early, I'll send a message to the team to introduce myself with video. And I'll tell you what I do get. I get immediate responses of people saying, this is wild. I've never seen this before. It gives me a chance to stand out just a little bit, which I think we're all looking to do professionally at times. But folks, there's two fantastic businesses. We're going to ask, books. We're going to ask Ethan in a second how we learn more. But I just want to call out both books first, if I can. Rehumanize Your Business, How Personal Videos Accelerate Sales and Improve Customer Experience. An absolutely fantastic book from 2019. And the latest book from 2021, Human-Centered Communication, a Business Case Against Digital Pollution. Ethan, people, when they hear this, they're going to want to learn more. How do they get in touch or learn more about you or BombBomb?
Thank you so much for the opportunity. Thank you for the positive feedback. I really, really enjoyed it. Happy to do it anytime. We didn't even talk as much video as I expected, which is totally fine. But so if you want to learn more about the books, they're at bombbomb.com/book. Or you can find them on Amazon or wherever you prefer to buy books. My name is Ethan Beute. Last name is spelled Beute, and I'm on most of the social networks by first and last name. Of course, on LinkedIn, they're separated, but on Instagram or Twitter, they're jammed together. So it's Ethan Beute, and we're BombBomb, bombbomb.com. And BombBomb on all the social networks as well. And I absolutely welcome direct outreach. If you've listened to this point in the conversation, I'd be happy to hear from you directly and answer any questions you might have about anything we covered here. Or didn't, maybe got on the edge of, but didn't really go in depth at. And so you can email me directly. It's just Ethan, ETHAN @bombbomb.com.
And folks, all of those connection points, those will be links in the show notes for today. You can also listen to Ethan's podcast, Customer Experience Podcast. So
yeah, that's bombbomb.com/podcast or the Customer Experience Podcast in all the places.
All the places. And so again, Ethan, thank you so much. So what a pleasure meeting you today. And you're right, you'll be back on our show. We'll be pestering you because this was so fantastic. And I did want to just say thank you to everybody listening here today. So, the reason we do this is we're trying to elevate the professionalism and the performance of B2B sales. This is a topic we all love. I'd just like to thank everybody for investing in your careers by taking some time and your growth orientation. And we've got growth orientation too. And we know the podcast isn't perfect. When somebody like me is driving it, let us know what we can do to improve it. What do you want to hear about? How can we make this more valuable to you? It's also, I'm going to give you my email, Mark Cox, MARKCOX @inthefunnel.com. That goes directly to me and I respond to it. But those of you who've sent us some coaching tips, thank you. And anybody else who's got great ideas for us, please share them because we always want to improve the effectiveness of this podcast for you. Thanks to everybody and good selling.